In the 1930s, archaeologists pulled bronze arrowheads out of a scorched wall in northwest Turkey. The wall went down in a firestorm around 1180 BC, and it stands on the exact hill where legend says Troy burned. For most of modern history, serious scholars filed the Trojan War next to dragons and sea monsters. A beautiful poem, a national fairy tale. Nothing more. And yet the hill is real. The fire is real. The weapons are still in the walls. So this is the question the next 10 minutes will answer. Did Homer's war actually happen? Getting to the answer took a con man's fortune, a smuggled treasure, and a clay tablet written by an enemy king, and I promise you, the truth is stranger than the epic. Start with what the world believed. Homer's Iliad was written down around the 8th century BC, describing a war that, if it happened at all, happened some 400 years earlier. No written records, no ruins anyone could point to. By the 1800s, the educated consensus in Europe was simple. Troy was a place like Atlantis, a city made of words, but in the far northwest corner of Anatolia, where the Dardanelles straight funnels every ship between the Aegean and the Black Sea, there was a low, unimpressive mound the locals called Hisarlık, the place of fortresses, barely 30 meters high, covered in thorns and pottery shards. An Englishman named Frank Calvert had quietly bought part of that mound. He was a local diplomat, an amateur archaeologist, and he was convinced, decades before anyone else, that Homer's city was under his feet. He dug small, careful test trenches. He found ancient walls. What he didn't have was money. And then, in 1868, money walked up the hill. Heinrich Schliemann was a German merchant who had made himself absurdly rich. Indigo, war commodities, banking gold dust in California. And who told anyone who would listen that he'd been obsessed with Homer since childhood. Much of what Schliemann said about himself was, to put it kindly, embroidered. He faked diary entries. He invented dramatic scenes. He was, by most modern accounts, a brilliant, shameless self-promoter. But he believed the Iliad was a map. And when Calvert pointed him at Hisarlık, he attacked that hill with everything his fortune could buy. Remember this, because it matters later. Schliemann wasn't looking for the truth. He was looking for Homer, and that obsession would find gold, and destroy almost everything else. In 1870 he started digging, at first without even waiting for an Ottoman permit. He hired workmen by the dozens, and cut a trench straight through the center of the mound, 17 meters deep, wide as a boulevard. What he found stunned everyone, including him. Hisarlık wasn't one buried city. It was 9. 9 cities stacked on top of each other like the pages of a closed book. 3,000 years of settlements, each one built on the flattened bones of the last. The hill itself was artificial. The hill was the city, layer upon layer. Schliemann reasoned that Homer's Troy must be near the bottom, so he tore downward, shoveling out the upper layers and dumping them as spoil. And in 1873, in the spring, right at the level he wanted it to be, gold. Diadems of woven gold, thousands of rings, beads, buttons, and bracelets, silver vessels, bronze weapons, golden earrings by the hundreds. Schliemann named it Priam's treasure, after Troy's doomed king, and he photographed his young Greek wife, Sophia, wearing the headdress he called the Jewels of Helen. Then he smuggled the entire hoard out of the Ottoman Empire, some say in baskets, under the noses of the inspectors, and presented it to a dazzled European public. He had found Troy. He had found the treasure of its king. He was the most famous archaeologist alive. There was just one problem. The gold was too old, not by decades, by roughly 1,000 years. The layer Schliemann tore into, the one archaeologists now call Troy VII, had burned around 2400 BC. Homer's war, if it happened, belonged around 1200 BC. The treasure Schliemann held up to the cameras came from a city that had already been dead and buried for a millennium before Achilles could ever have been born, which leads to the most painful sentence in the history of archaeology. In his race to reach Homer's Troy, Schliemann had dug straight through it and thrown it on the spoil heap. The city he was looking for was in the layers he destroyed. And the treasure? Its story gets stranger. It went to Berlin, survived one world war in a museum case, and then in 1945, as the city fell, it vanished. For almost 50 years it was presumed lost forever, melted down, or buried in rubble. Then, in 1993, Moscow quietly confirmed what rumor had long whispered. The gold of Troy had been in the Pushkin Museum the entire time, carried east as war spoils. It sits in Russia to this day, a treasure taken from a ruined city, taken again from a ruined city. So if Schliemann found the wrong Troy, what about the right one? This is where the story stops being about gold and starts being about ash. In the 1930s, an American team under Carl Blegen went back to the mound with modern methods and picked apart the layers Schliemann had ignored. Near the top of the Bronze Age sequence, they found a city archaeologists called Troy VIIa, and Troy VIIa did not fade away quietly. It was destroyed suddenly and violently, right around 1180 BC. Blegen's team found a destruction layer of ash and collapsed brick up to a meter thick. They found bronze arrowheads embedded in the walls. They found caches of riverstone sling ammunition stockpiled by the defenders. And in the streets they found people, left where they fell, never given a burial. Review: human remains described, phrased without graphic detail. Check ad friendliness. Cities that fall to earthquakes don't leave arrowheads in their walls. Cities that starve don't stockpile sling stones. This city was besieged, stormed, and burned. At the right place, at the right time. And then came the evidence nobody expected, from the enemy's own filing cabinet. Hundreds of kilometers to the east, archaeologists excavating Hittite, capital of the Hittite Empire, recovered thousands of clay tablets, the diplomatic archive of a Bronze Age superpower. And in those tablets, again and again, appears a small vassal kingdom in exactly Troy's corner of Anatolia. The Hittites called it Wilusa. Say it out loud next to the Greek name for Troy: Ilios, Wilusa, Ilios. Around 1280 BC, a Hittite king signed a treaty with Wilusa's ruler, a man named Alexandru. In Homer, the prince who triggers the Trojan War carries a second name, Alexandros. And one extraordinary letter, the Tawagalawa letter, has a Hittite king writing to the king of a western sea power called Ahiawa, a name most scholars read as Homer's own word for the Greeks, the Achaeans. In it he refers to a conflict the two empires had fought in the past, over Wilusa, a Greek Trojan War mentioned in passing in an enemy king's mail. Modern excavations close the case on Troy's importance. From 1988, teams under Manfred Kaufmann scanned the fields below the citadel with magnetometers and found what Schliemann never imagined: a sprawling lower town and a defensive ditch cut into bedrock, making Troy many times larger than the little hilltop fort. A real city, home to thousands, sitting on the one strait every merchant ship in the region had to fight the wind to pass. Rich, strategic, fortified. exactly the kind of place people go to war over. So, did the Trojan War happen? Here's the honest answer, and it's better than a simple yes. No serious archaeologist claims we've found Achilles or Helen or a wooden horse. What the ground gives us is this: a wealthy fortified city at the mouth of the Dardanelles, burned in a siege around 1180 BC, known to the greatest empire of its day, by almost the same name Homer used, ruled by a man whose name echoes Homer's prince, and fought over, in writing, by Bronze Age Greeks. Most of the archaeologists who have actually dug at Troy came away convinced that some real war lies underneath the poem. Homer wasn't writing history. He was doing something almost more remarkable, carrying the memory of a real catastrophe across 4 centuries, with nothing but the human voice. No writing existed in Greece for most of that time. The story survived as sound, grandparents to grandchildren, singers to singers, 400 years in the dark. And when the Greeks finally learned to write again, the first thing they wrote down was this: "It makes you wonder how many other myths are memories wearing a costume." Today you can stand on that hill. The trench Schliemann cut is still there, a scar and a monument at the same time, to a man who found the city and wounded it in the same swing of the pick. The gold sits in Moscow. The arrowheads sit in museum drawers, and the walls of the 6th and 7th cities still stand, where 3,000 years of wind off the Dardanelles couldn't knock them down. Troy was supposed to be a story. It turned out to be an address.